The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is...
What's so special about the Vibram Fivefingers?
Well, really and truly, it's the person that's wearing them, which I know sounds a bit corny, but that is what it's all about. It's not the shoe, it's the person, and that's why, you know, the slogan is "You are the technology." You know, with Vibram Fivefingers, you are the technology. It's not the shoe. The shoe basically acts like a second skin and doesn't compromise your function. It allows all the toes to move independently. It allows you to feel everything. There's no restriction on any joint in the foot. Lateral spread of the toes, all this kind of thing, which is what's naturally occurring when you're walking barefoot. So essentially, they just provide a little bit of protection from sharp things and from thermal stresses, this kind of thing. The foot's evolved to give, you know, massive sensory feedback. It really is a ground scanning device. When you look at the embryology of it, it turns out that the fingertips and the soles of the feet are made from the same tissue as the eyes and the ears and special senses. So, you know, they really are literally designed to scan the ground in the same way that, you know, a visually impaired person might use a white stick to scan the ground as they go. The feet are designed to do the same thing. And from an evolutionary perspective, human beings are designed as tetrapods, as four-legged creatures. And, you know, much of our anatomy and neurology that we've inherited is based on that kind of design, that architecture, if you like. So what we've done is we've gone from all fours back onto our hind legs, and now we've just halved our amount of input that we can get from the ground, the sensory inputs. And then on top of that, we've then got to put thick wedges of polyurethane or gel pads or air bubbles or whatever between us and the ground. And that's a really bad idea, because now we can't feel what's going on at all. So it's kind of, when you look at it, it's a bit of a funny situation, because you know, animals have never worn shoes, including primates, of which we're one, and yet, you know, we're all designed to be able to move on rugged, soft, hard, slippery, dry, whatever ground. You know, you're supposed to be able to go over any terrain. That's what animals have to do to survive. And I guess for a few thousand years we've used animal skins and some of what would be the equivalent of the early prototypes of the minimalist footwear, you know, things like moccasin shoes, for example. But in this story, it hasn't been really till the 1970s, just 40 years ago, that the running shoe was created. So at that point, essentially, you know, what we created was, you know, sensory deprivation devices, and so that's probably a large reason as to why between 60 and 85% of runners get injured on a yearly basis. So the majority of runners pick up an injury on a yearly basis. It's probably because they can't sense what's going on with their feet, and so it's affecting their running technique, and it's affecting the forces that are going through the lower leg. But, you know, I think this is the real clincher, and that is that in science, you have to disprove your hypothesis. So what you have to do is not to say, you know, for me as a retailer or a distributor of Vibram Fivefingers, I shouldn't be looking for evidence to prove that they work. I should be looking for evidence that they don't work. But there's no strong evidence of that anywhere. So the other path to take is to look for evidence that proves that orthotics and running shoes do work. And when you look for that evidence, it's sorely missing, because, and in fact the research that's been done shows that the more expensive the running shoe you buy, the more likely you are to get injured. For example, that was one report. Another study, in fact most of the studies on orthotics shows that when you get to the high quality, well controlled studies, orthotics at best have just an unpredictable effect. You know, it's not predictable what they do, and the body doesn't respond in the way you might expect it to. That's because you're not static anymore. As soon as you start moving, there's no telling what the body will do when it's got some kind of wedge under the foot. The interesting thing really is that in science it's the new intervention that should prove itself. It's a little bit like, you know, if we introduce antidepressants to everyone 20 years ago, then you can't just introduce antidepressants to the market. You've got to test and prove that it doesn't do damage. But let's say that by now most of the population are on antidepressants or on statins or something like that, it's like saying, well, that's the default way to work, therefore you've got to prove it's safe not to be on statins. And this is the kind of situation we've got with running shoes, is that because people have been doing it for 20 or 30 years because they thought it was the right thing, now people are realising maybe it's not the right thing. And so there's all this kind of, furore about the idea that going barefoot is dangerous, yet we've been doing it for millions of years. So the burden of proof is on the trainer manufacturers and the orthotics manufacturers to prove that their things are safe, not on the barefoot guys to prove that they're... at this point it looks like a radical rethink is needed, and our aim is to lead the way in that rethink.